Okay, I am going to be showing you today a quick little watercolor warm-up exercise, something to get you familiar with the paints if you're new to watercolors, get you familiar with the materials, or something that just can help you get rid of artist block or loosen you up. And what it's going to be is just a simple line painting. And the way that I'm going to do this is to do sort of an abstract landscape, desert landscape. You can do this however you want. You can do uniform lines across the page, choose whatever color scheme, whatever fits your fancy. But what I'm using for this is I've got my basic Winsor & Newton watercolor palette, which I clearly keep very clean and tidy. Water, if you want to have two containers of water, one for rinsing and one for loading up your brush with clean water so that you don't muddy up your the colors that you're using, then by all means. I am just used to having one, so I only work with one, and what I'm doing is going to be kind of earth tony, so I don't mind if they get a little bit muddy. And then I've got a rag to blot off extra water or paint from my brushes. And then I have a number 8 and, which one is this? Number 12 round brush. I like using round brushes because they're pretty versatile. You can get pretty thin lines with the tips, and you can smush them down and get pretty thick lines as well. But I will be starting with my number 8, and I'm just going to use a little spray bottle and spritz down my watercolors just to let them get activated. And don't know where that came from. I am going to start with the sky. So I'm just going to use a bunch of different colors and just make some funky little lines in the sky, different thicknesses, picking up my brush and just squishing it down to change the thickness of the line. And as it's really wet, I'll also just dab in some different types of blue, and just to let things bleed and look a little bit more interesting. And you probably can't see it, I've super lightly sketched out a horizon line where I'm gonna stop my blue for the sky, and I'm gonna start my lines for the foreground and middle ground. So I am just going to avoid those areas, but in the meantime, just fill in the sky with some funky lines, a bunch of different colors, just kind of messing with it. Goal is to not think too hard and not take it too seriously, which can be easier said than done. I'm just varying the colors of blue that I use just to kind of switch it up and make the sky look kind of funky. You'll notice I created a break in the line there. If you can't see my super light sketch, that's where part of my horizon line is. And I'm just kind of going to go through and fill in the gaps, make all the funky shapes continue even where there's breaks. Lines don't have to go all the way across the page either. I mean, really, there's no rules. And I'm also varying the tone of the blues by the amount of saturation of the pigment. So how much water versus pigment I'm using. That one, for example, had too much of both. So this is where this rag comes in handy. I can actually blot off the excess and make sure it doesn't drip or smear. Again, I'm trying not to think too hard about what I'm doing. Just putting paint on the paper, and you also don't have to try to make this look like anything. You can draw random squiggles to avoid instead of a horizon line and just do different colors within them. I don't know, there's plenty of ways to do any of these exercises, and usually I'll use the same sort of vibe or technique, and I'll just kind of do it slightly differently every time, because you always learn a little bit, and sometimes I figure out something that I really like, sometimes I find things I really don't like, and it's nice to not have the pressure of a full painting that I'm trying to make look like something specific, you know. Yes, this is my goal with this, is to make it look like a landscape, but that if it doesn't look like a landscape, then it doesn't look like a landscape. While these are drying, I might work on the foreground. I tend to be impatient. You can use a heat gun or a blow dryer if you want to speed this process up. Set it in front of a heater, whatever. I don't have any of those things right now, so the way that I still pander to my impatience is I'll work on a different place within the painting that I don't risk touching the wet areas. So if you're unfamiliar with watercolor, whatever you touch, if it's wet, it will bleed. So this area right here, this blue is really wet. If I go back in and I gently tap that area with a different blue, you can see it bleed in. So if you're trying to keep crisp lines like I am more or less with these sort of waves in the sky, I don't really want to touch them with anything wet, especially if it's like for this, it's going to be a desert scene, which is oranges, reds, yellows, which are on the complementary side to blue, orange especially. So if it bleeds, it'll really make the sky kind of muddy and brown. So I want to avoid that. Also, I tend to not tape down my paintings. If you don't like this little buckle that you get, which I'll grant is annoying, but I usually like to kind of twist my paper around and get different angles with my brush. Or sometimes if the water's dripping, I like to pick my paper up and move it around. If you don't want to do that, or if you still want to do that, but you don't want the paper to buckle, you can either tape it down to your table or get a smaller board to tape it to, and that will help hold it flat. And you'll get crisp kind of border lines, which if you're going to mat and frame a piece, it'll give you like a little buffer that you're not covering any of the painting. I don't mind covering the painting. I'm not very precious with the space, so I just kind of go with it as it is. And thankfully, my house is very warm right now, so this is all drying relatively quickly. In the meantime, I'm going to mix up some, I'll move this out of the way so you can see. I'm going to mix up some earthy, deserty oranges, yellows, reds. Again, my palette is not clean. I usually don't keep it clean. I just work with what's there. If I really need a super crisp color, I'll maybe wipe off the surface of the pan itself. But usually I'm doing a lot of landscape painting, and I'm working with earth tones, which are not necessarily this vibrant, a little bit muddier. So I usually just work with what's there and add to it. Again, whatever your preference is. You can use a clean paper plate if you really want a clean slate. And as I'm going, I'm adding a healthy amount of water to what I'm mixing. so that the paint will A, stay wet in the palette longer, and B, the color will go farther. So as I add more pigment, I'm adding more water so that there's more liquid suspended, more liquid suspending the pigment. So it is a little bit diluted. I won't get super vibrant pigments with this, but that's not really what I'm going for. If I wanted something super vibrant, I could just let the water evaporate a bit. So this isn't quite as earthy as I want. So I'm kind of dulling it down a little bit with some browns, and I should know the names of all of these colors, and I don't at the moment. So we're just going with browns, sienna probably, or red ochre maybe, I don't know. So these two colors will be kind of my base, and then depending on how much water I add, you'll see more of the paper show through with that kind of translucency of watercolor paint, and that will help make it like lighter rather than adding white. You just use the whiteness of the paper. And then I can mix these two colors as well. So you can see kind of what I'm working with. It's going to be out of frame. This is the problem when you don't have a super clean workspace, which I generally don't, is I've got to shuffle things around all the time. Ended up, I'm probably not going to use this after all. I could have used it for the sky because the lines are thicker, but I think with this size paper, which this size paper is 5.5 by 8.5, I think that this round brush size 8 is a good size for what I'm working with. So now I'm gonna go in and start deciding what I want to do with my lines. Already overlapped. Thankfully it was dry. You can always just use a paper towel, your finger, a rag, whatever, to wipe off the areas where you don't want the paint. You'll never get it right back to pure white, but you can kind of get rid of any flubs if you act quick. And again, you can't see my horizon lines probably, but you can infer them based on the sky. I'm just kind of going up to them, but not past them with these new lines that I'm adding in. And like I did with the sky, where it's wet, I'm just kind of adding in some other colors. And I genuinely have no idea how this is going to turn out or if I'm going to like it, but that's not the point. We're here for the ride. And I love the sort of wavy bands of different geologic features in the desert sandstone. Ideally, that's what I am capturing here, but it's not supposed to be exact. It's abstract. It doesn't need to be perfect, I keep telling myself. And it's always a work in progress, whether or not I believe myself. And I'm just kind of mixing little bits of the orange that I mixed and the red so that I'm getting kind of a gradient of bands that are sort of between those two colors. Actually going to make this red even a little bit darker as I get down to the bottom of this area here. A little bit more brown. Depending on where you've gone in the desert, you may have firsthand experience with this, but you can make this any color you want because I have seen just about every color of sandstone, even bluish and purplish. So again, it's abstract. I'm reiterating these things mostly for myself, if that isn't clear. Okay, now the tricky part where this is wet. So I sketched this out so that that rock band is sort of a background rock band, and this will be more of a foreground rock band. I'm trying to decide. No, I'll keep it simple. I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to leave space to put a couple little green shrubs or cacti in the foreground. But I think I'll keep this simple. This is supposed to be simple. But as you can see, there's many ways to mess with it and modify it. But I will have to be very careful here so that these don't bleed, these lines don't bleed. And I think this foreground rock feature, I am going to do a little bit more yellow. So it's a little bit more vibrant. Things that are in the foreground tend to be more saturated and more vibrant than things in the background because you're looking through less atmosphere, and the air particles and whatever other particulate matter is in the atmosphere between you and things that are farther away sort of washes out that color. If you think of like those iconic pictures of the Blue Ridge Mountains, you know, sort of the misty ridge lines going into the distance, that's what you're looking through. And I'm adding a little bit more yellow to this mixture. And I notice sometimes there are points on my paper where the paint doesn't want to stick. And usually those areas are fingerprint shaped. So my assumption is that I had lotion, chapstick, something maybe greasy or oily on my hands, and I touched the paper in that spot. Usually I can just sort of work that area a little bit more with my brush and almost rub the pigment into the page and they'll go away. But sometimes I just leave them because I'm not that precious with things again. You can see that happened just there. There's a fingerprint right here. And if I rub across it, I can get the pigment to absorb a little bit more, but I'm not really going for the most even distribution of pigments across these lines, as you can see, so I don't mind all that much. That line is very faint, but I kind of like it, so I'm going to leave it. And we're just going to roll with that little bit of green that's in there. Because this is still wet here, I'm going to leave space, white space, so I don't touch my brush over here. And that will also kind of create this, that negative space will create the separation between the foreground and the background. It's another little greasy spot on the page. I have no idea what my grubby little fingers were up to before I ripped this paper off, but add a little bit of orange in here as well. Lighten that up a bit. Just sort of go with the flow, whatever feels right. All right, there you have it. Funky little desert landscape. If I wanted to, which jury's out if I want to do this or not. We'll see after it dries. After it's dried, I could come back through with a black pen or a micron pen and outline things, add in details, add in designs. If I do that, I might bring you back so you can see what I'm doing just as a fun little doodly thing. So I did end up going back with the pen, as you can see. I don't love it, but I'm showing it anyways because you don't have to love everything to do it. And I think it's important to show some not perfect finished products. So this is just kind of a doodle, a mess around. I might just go and add some more funky doodles to the sky. I don't know. I might flip it over, do something else on the back. But this is just an example. If you get done doing your funky paint drawing and you don't feel like you're ready to be done, you can go back and embellish in whatever way you see fit. You may ruin it, and that's okay. I will say it again. You may ruin it, and that is okay. But go forth, play around, have fun.